Bayou out of its bank. We're situated next to the East Houston Regional Medical Center that's taken on water. In the middle of your screen, it's difficult to make out. There is a person, we're being told from some eyewitnesses, a woman who's holding on to the center of the barricade there in the interstate, right in the middle. Rescuers in that boat there have been trying to get to her. They haven't been able to get over there. I imagine because the current's pretty swift at this point. We've seen the Coast Guard circle a couple times. I'm not sure if they've seen her, but again, a lot of people here just kind of watching what's unfolding right now in front of us. We don't have a whole lot of information on how she ended up there, whether she was in a vehicle on I-10, but you're looking again live at Interstate 10 here on the east side of town. The water is out of its banks at Greens Bayou. It's completely covering the road. It is impassable at this point. And you might be having a better vantage point of this woman than I can see from where I'm standing. But again, we can see rescuers in the boat. They're trying to make their way to her. A lot of people just watching and waiting right now to see what happens.
Hey, Steve, is she hanging on to the center medium of the freeway? That's what appears as what she's doing.
Or a truck. I see a truck, too, there in the middle that she might be holding on to.
There looks to be a box truck,
Gina,
and it looks to me, from my vantage point, I'm going to have a photographer zoom in here, that it looks like she's holding on to that concrete barrier. So just to give you an idea of how, to give you an idea of how deep the water is. That water is, you know, over the top of the concrete barrier. So it looks like she's on the westbound side of the freeway headed into Houston. So she would be on the opposite flow of the current, right? The current would be pushing her into that barrier. So she's there being, I assumed, pushed into that barrier, holding on to perhaps a submerged vehicle, perhaps the concrete barrier. Again, very difficult to see from this vantage point. But those boaters, from our understanding from eyewitnesses out here, is that they've been trying to get to her.
Yeah, she's struggling to hang on because she's dipping in and out of that water, Steve.
It looks like they're trying to go to her very slowly so as not to cause too much current, which obviously would make it harder for her to hold on. But the good news certainly is that she can see. You're blocking the camera now.
Somebody's blocking the camera. There you go. Thank you.
She can see that help is right there on the way.
I mean, I could see them with a rope as well.
I just want to tell you this.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, just to give you an idea of what's unfolding here on the northeast side of town, because it's been difficult to make our way around here. There's the Greens Bayou, and then I believe another body of water that kind of meet near the East Houston Regional Medical Center. And I imagine those bodies of water are swelling, and that water is what you're seeing here engulfing I-10 here on the East Freeway. So that's the scene of where this water is coming from, in case you're wondering. It's not raining right now. Where's this water coming from? That's where the water's coming from, but I'm not sure how long she's been out here. I know we have some eyewitnesses out here. You guys, how long have you been out here? You don't know? You guys, how long have you been out here?
When the shot backs up, it's even more incredible to see how much water.
David, Steve here with Channel 13. Okay. You've been out here for about 30 minutes. Has she been out here? What have you seen unfold?
She don't want to back. She don't want to come back.
She doesn't want to come back. She's fearful of potentially going over the barrier. That would make a lot of sense, Art and Gina, because you probably wouldn't want to go across the barrier because you would be fearful that the current might sweep you away. Has anybody else been out here longer? Has anybody else seen what's been going on out here?
She's not good. She's just crazy. She's no.
So she's obviously upset from what's going on. So you're hearing from an eyewitness there who's been out here about 30 minutes or so, saying it appears that she's obviously flustered, obviously anxious, obviously desperate right now in this situation to see what's going on. You can see the boaters trying to get closer to her. It appears from what that eyewitness was saying that they've kind of signaled to her to possibly, I'd imagine, go over the barrier to get closer to them. But if I was in her shoes, I may be reluctant to do so, too, because the current here is very strong.
They keep going toward her and then back, I noticed, too.
I'm trying to understand what they're doing here, because they're going toward her and then they're moving back, and they have a rope line, but they don't toss it to her. She seems to be struggling somewhat. I don't understand why someone just doesn't jump in the water and rescue her. I don't know. You know, perhaps that, I don't know.
Art, the only thing I would say the only thing to say about that situation is I just want to give you a perspective of how deep this water is. So I imagine they're probably very reluctant to do so. If we can just zoom out just a little bit and keep a shot on her, you can see the Valero gas station to the right. The water is, I mean, up to the top, if not almost over the entire gas station.
Yeah, that
so
is
this
incredible.
water is deep.
It's really
flowing.
Deep. Yeah, absolutely.
And
I mean, that's 12
again,
feet on the Valero.
she's probably being saved right now by that barrier being held back. Exactly, Gina.
Do you know if she
certainly
has a
deep
life
water,
vest
deep
on?
rushing water.
Steve, we can't tell if she has a life vest on. Do people around her know if she has a life vest on? I mean, I would assume not. I would assume she wasn't prepared to be swept away by a current.
Gina, I simply don't know because, quite honestly, we're pretty far back here on I-10. We're here where the water, where there is no water on the freeway, so we're pretty far back. I'm not sure how she got in this situation or what happened.
It looks like a T-shirt. Your photographer just did a zoom in for us, and it looks like she has on a T-shirt, and that's it.
You know what?
And off screen, and I'm not going to pan to this, Art and Gina, but off screen there is another gentleman who's now pulling in a boat, a boat with a big pickup truck, trying to get it into the westbound lanes of I-10 to get that boat in here, presumably trying to get to this woman. But again, we've seen helicopters circling in this area, and people have been waving from the ground up here. Again, we got here about last 10 minutes or so. People have been waving to those helicopters, trying to get their attention on what's unfolding there on your screen. A woman obviously in distress, fearful right now she might be swept away by the currents here on Interstate 10.
Oh, wow, look at that shot just to see how far.
So much water in that area.
And just to give you an idea of how many people are out here watching this unfold, hoping for the best right now.
Yeah, now, you say there's a current there, but I'm sure, is it because of the water flow, because it's receding, or is that what's causing the current in that area? Because I know that there's not a river here close by. This is a result of just overflow and just flooding. But is that water flowing somewhere else? I suppose it's just trying to go downstream.
Art, I would suspect that the Greens Bayou, which has flooded out parts of Uvalde and Normandy here on the northeast side of town, that bayou is out of its banks, flooding the freeway along with the other channel that's just to the east of it. Forgive me for lapsing on the name there, but those two bodies of water.
Right. Yeah, no
Those two bodies of water have swelled, and so the water, as you know, our meteorologists have told us time and time again, that water, flows out to the Gulf, so it's flowing south, right? And it's flowing at a pretty good current because we tried to pass on one of the feeder roads just south of here, actually on Market Street, but we were unable to move our news vehicle through there because the rushing water was too intense at that point.
Well, we know Greens Bayou is so bad that a bridge over Greens Bayou collapsed. Yeah, so we know how heavy the rainfall has been in that area. We see a wrong way sign right there too, and you know those signs are usually a good 8 feet up, and it looks like there's only 2 feet left below that sign. There they go again, trying to approach her. We're hoping they can throw out a stick, maybe the pole there. Oh, here they go with that. Let's
see if she is able to grab that. I'm assuming that because if that concrete barrier, she must be balancing herself on top of that if it's that deep, and trying to, keep herself balanced on that.
She is right alongside that concrete barrier, and you can see the water pushing from north to south, so over the westbound lanes, over the eastbound lanes, pushing that boat, I presumably, farther south as well.
I'm wondering if they're afraid that they might be running into something on the
photographer,
bottom
Chris O'Sara, I'm working with, is saying he was saying he can see from his perspective, it looks like the boat's fighting the current right now to try to get to her.
Yeah, it looks like it is going toward them. And, we have seen so many incredible rescues over the past few days. And this is just another one as we try and save every single person in southeast Texas that we can lay eyes on. And so there she goes. What is she losing? She looks like she's trying to walk now.
And I want to draw your attention very quickly, Art and Gina, if Chris, you can hear me, if we can pan out and look to the right here, we have two gentlemen who right now are moving this boat into the floodwaters here at Interstate 10. Presumably, you're trying to get to her, sir, correct? Sir, it appears that they're trying to get to her. Chris, if you can just zoom out and show them here on again, we're on the eastbound lanes of the freeway right now. You can see these two gentlemen are working to get this boat in the eastbound lanes of I-10, presumably to reach her.
Well, I wonder why the other boat is not able to reach her. I suppose we're not there. We don't completely understand why they're not able to reach her, but perhaps this boat can because they're on the opposite side of that current. They don't have to fight it.
Fight against it. And I'm thinking maybe, too, that they're concerned if they go too fast toward her, that they might rush her over, like the water might go over her head. Right. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say I was a boat captain.
When you were hearing from some of the eyewitnesses some of the eyewitnesses we spoke with off camera were saying that from their understanding that she is very distraught. So might not be necessarily processing what's unfolding right before her.
Well, it's great that there are 2 boats there making an attempt to rescue her, and I'm sure they are going to. We're going to stay with it, obviously, but I certainly feel like they're going to figure it out with her right in front of their face. Again, it seems like every day at this time of day, one of the challenges too we're looking at is you want to get the rescue done before the sun goes down. Right. And I can see that it's still light out, but we don't have a lot of time before the sun goes down, so they want to figure it out before that happens.
Absolutely. And Stephen, I think you may have discussed this before, but I was just wondering, how did she even end up there? Did she decide to go for a walk, or did she drive her vehicle into that area?
Art, simply, we don't know the answer to that question right now. The eyewitnesses who are out here, and there are hundreds at this point looking on here on the east side of the waterway, are looking on. No one seems to know the answer to that question.
You know, another
how
observation.
Exactly she ended up in that.
Yeah. Another observation
I
our
will
producer
say that
pointed out, Steve, I'm sorry, is that there could be boats that are preventing, cars below the boat, keeping the boat from going any farther. Yeah. Because you never know how many.
That's actually a fantastic observation because you see a box truck. You see a box truck that's almost, it looks like the cabin of that box truck is covered. So with the cabin of a box truck being covered, you would assume that water could be covering cars there as well.
It looks like that other boat is getting pretty close to her, which is a good thing, but still not approaching her. They must be able to see something under that water that prevents them from going forward. You know, and you have an engine, of course. They probably have one of those 200 horsepower engines on the back end of that little boat, or 100 horsepower, and that engine drops at least 1.5 feet or 2 feet. And so as a result of that, you know, you're going to be hitting anything on the underneath. So perhaps they're watching out for that. But you're right, Steve. Look at that Valero gas station. Those signs are so high.
How high the water is.
And just to speculate, Art and Gina, at this point, as to where she might have been, whether she was in a car or something like that, to the north of the freeway, there's a motel. There's also apartments and homes there. So quite honestly, it would be difficult to see where exactly at this point how she ended up there.
Yeah. You know, and including our news crews here at the station, but certainly I can see the case is true with these the folks on the boats there. A lot of people just don't walk around with vests, life preserver vests, and you know, you would like to think people have them on boats, but a lot of boats got called into action, and I'm seeing that, you know, I don't see. It looks like the boat that was out there first, some of those folks have on life vests, but the boat now approaching her, they don't, so there's not the option necessarily of throwing her out a life vest, which is one of the options normally you might want to take advantage of.
Those 2 gentlemen on that boat that just got in the water, unfortunately I wasn't able to get to them before they got out there, but they look like just 2 average citizens. Yeah. I'm not sure. They're obviously not affiliated with any kind of law enforcement agency. They just look like 2 people out here with a boat who just backed up their truck and unloaded it.
Is the other boat affiliated with, are they from a local agency, or are they just volunteers?
Chris, can you see that from your vantage point, whether or not the first boat is with any law enforcement agency?
What does that say on the side? I think
Billy Sticks.
Billy Sticks. I don't.
It looks like that's a regular citizen. Yeah. And you know what? The story of this.
It looks like this is Houston again. Just perfect strangers out here trying to help this woman out.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it is. But they do have I saw the person have a life. She does.
They do on that boat.
They have a life vest.
It's the second boat. I mean, it's really the story of this, I think, when all is said and done, is going to be how many people there were like this who saved thousands of people. There's no way to tax all of us citizens enough to get a official type at every scene over thousands of miles where there's been flooding. And so people like this, we really depend on them to help save our friends and neighbors.
The numbers are astronomical when you start speaking about those evacuations or rescues. Well, they just threw her a line. I just saw a line being thrown to her from that opposite side. So let's see what happens. She's got a hold of it. She's got a hold of it.
Steve, we're going to turn it over to you.
She's coming to the side, and there it is. Looks like she's been rescued. They just bumped into something.
It looks like that gentleman who
is
pulling
grabbing
her onto that boat right now as we speak.
Wow.
There you go.
Grabbing her.
They jumped right into action.
With no life vest on, she's heavy because she's wet. You know, I don't know how much she weighs, but she's heavy because she's wet. And he reached right over there and grabbed her by her shirt and pulled her on up to safety. Not knowing what's below that, as you said, you know, that could be hitting his boat. Amazing.
Just jump back in.
Wait a minute. She just jumped back in.
She jumped back in. My photographer is saying that she just jumped back in.
Okay, she just jumped back in. This is clearly someone who does not want to be rescued.
I think that she jumped back in.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
I don't
that
understand
coincides
that,
with what eyewitnesses were telling us out here, that she was distraught.
That she was so distraught.
You know what?
She may have a mental health problem because
I think that's who we're dealing with, Steve.
Oh, this breaks your heart because obviously she was not comfortable hanging onto the wall. That was obvious.
But she was laying down. She was perfectly safe. There was no reason for her to get off the edge again. But she clearly has other issues, I think, that we're dealing with here, because even a person in shock would not do that. It would just,
there's something else going
on the boat. There's something else.
And you don't know what other kind of losses and how people react to the other losses they have sustained because of this. She seems like she's walking though now, right?
At this point, she's being able to stand.
To walk, yes.
So I'm not sure if they got her a little bit closer.
Yeah.
More shallow land there.
It's difficult when you're dealing with someone who simply, at least at this point, does not want to be rescued. But, Stephen, we're going to walk away from this because we have other
something we've not seen
video
before
to get to. Yeah. Of all the rescues we have seen, which have been into the tens of thousands,
I was going to say,
I think this is the first that we have seen of someone saying, hey, I don't want to jump back in the water.
I mean, we've seen a lot of situations where people are under mandatory evacuations and they choose not to leave their home, but obviously it's because they don't feel their life is in danger. They have electricity. They're thinking they can go to the second floor. They think they'll be okay. They've weathered storms before, but to see someone jump back in the water, pardon me, it's unnerving.
It really is.
We want to move on, and we'll come back to that as warranted, but we want to move on to Kingwood.
Right. Caitlin McCauley is out there. Is that, I believe that's who's out there. Okay, you're in Kingwood, Caitlin?
We are, Art. Hey, we're on a boat with gentlemen who came all the way to Kingwood from Kentucky. They drove here a few days ago, and they've been out on their boat making rescues ever since. Now, we are in a neighborhood. Just take a look at these incredible pictures. Water halfway up the sides of homes. We're in a neighborhood off of West Lake Houston Parkway and Kingwood Drive. There are several neighborhoods back here and townhomes as well. This whole afternoon, Texas Task Force 1 as well as volunteers have been coming out, running boats through this area, trying to see if there's anybody left in their homes. Look, there's a senior living facility here, it looks like. Hopefully all of these guys have evacuated. But it's just been boat after boat filled with people coming out of these homes, and there's a Coast Guard helicopter flying up ahead. These are not the usual sounds people in Kingwood hear. Coast Guard helicopters, boats, volunteers. We talked with one family that they were stationed back on West Lake Houston Parkway, waiting for these volunteers to come and pick up the people from their homes, and they're going to then drive them to a nearby church where they can take shelter shelter, get dried off, get some food. And now I want to talk with you guys, if you don't mind.
Sorry, we're going to have to interrupt you, Caitlin. We have a news conference to go to.
We certainly do. Let's go live to City Hall, and let's go to the mayor. He's going to be speaking. He is giving another news conference. He is actually at the Office of Emergency Management. Let's go ahead and listen.
24 hours, that's good news. On the west side of I-45, 1 to 2 inches, that's good news. Storms are moving to the east. Some winds gust about 30 miles per hour range here as storm center passes by, and by Thursday, we are clear for 2 to 3 days, assuming things remain on track. So that is good news. But the 1 trillion gallons of grain still have to go somewhere, and the reservoirs and the lakes across the region will cause flooding. We know that they've already caused flooding. So we're not done with the flooding, even if the skies are clear. With regards to the reservoirs, Barker Cypress, they have increased the release from Barker Cypress, but I'm going to let Steve speak to that issue. Okay.
Yes, as we discussed earlier this morning, the Corps had advised that they were going to increase the discharge rate up to 8,000 CFS. We've had additional conversations with the Corps. They've actually increased their discharge up to 14,000 CFS, and they're anticipating that they're going to peak somewhere around 16,000 CFS. And the reason for this additional discharge is to prevent as much overflow that's going from around the dam, that is currently going around the dam and attics. What impact that's having? It's having a direct impact right in the vicinity between Eldridge and Derry Ashford along Buffalo Bayou. That's where the discharges from both attics and Barker combine. It's currently right around an extra 0.7 of a foot. The flood level has risen, and we anticipate it's going to rise a little bit higher as they do reach up to 16,000 CFS. A little further downstream, it's actually below what it was, so it has an immediate impact right in the vicinity of the both discharges. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so this is a situation that we'll be closely monitoring. It certainly is going to increase the flow of water coming downstream, and certainly there will be some impact. We'll be watching carefully to kind of monitor that impact and the flooding conditions. So certainly asking everyone to be alert, to be attentive as we move forward. On the rescues, which continues to be a high priority for all of us, let me call on Chief Acevedo.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. As of approximately 1,700 hours since the last time we spoke, the Houston Police Department has rescued an additional 600 individuals. We've created several multi-agency forward staging areas throughout the city involving obviously HPD, HFD, federal agencies and state agencies, and a multitude of other local agencies. The mayor already addressed the flooding in the Kingwood area. We have approximately 529 calls holding, and we've responded to almost 2,000 calls for service in this operational period. Just on a side note, we have nearly 200 officers now whose homes have been damaged to some extent, and 47 facilities. We're tracking 200 plus high water locations, and TransStar is helping us track 440 high water locations throughout the region. The last thing I think is really important for our fellow agencies to know, and the convoys to know, that we're working diligently to start actually escorting convoys in there with the supplies and people and goods, which will help the operation as we move forward, the relief operations here in the greater Houston area.
Thank you, Chief. And Chief will be back in a little bit to speak on another issue as well. Chief Pena with the Fire Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's been an active 18 hours for this operational period. The Houston Fire Department has responded to over 2,100 incidents to date. Over 763 have been water rescue related incidents. So the number of water rescue operations continues. As a result, and in response, we've established 7 area commands. It's been a long day. Sorry, I thought he was mocking me. We've established
He doesn't look as young as he once did.
Now he's not going to say what I say, right? We've established 7 area commands throughout the city, and we're resourcing those appropriately. The areas of high demand continue to be the Kingwood area, especially the Enclave, Barrington, Royal Shores neighborhoods, as well as the Memorial City Mall area and the Maxey Road area along Greens Bayou. The Houston Fire Department responded and evacuated 124 seniors from the Maxey Road and I-10 nursing home, and they've been safely transported to an appropriate facility. Shelters, in support of the shelters, the Houston Fire Department has assigned some medic resources to those centers. We have 6 units assigned to Toyota Center, 5 units assigned to Dobie, and 7 units assigned to the GRB. At this time, we have 6 USAR teams actively engaged and incorporated into our rescue resources, and with an additional 350 personnel from those resources, we're able to rotate some crews that have been working long hours, and I continue to be incredibly impressed by the men and women of the Houston Fire Department. Most of them have been on duty for almost 2.5 days. So we're doing some things operationally to try to get those resources rested and back in the game, so to speak, efficiently. So the operation continues, and we'll continue to serve the demand as expected. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And of course, it's not just police and fire and the rescues, it's also the Coast Guard that's been a invaluable partner with us. Lieutenant Hart.
Good evening. Search and rescue continues to be the highest priority of the Coast Guard right now. The Coast Guard is continuing to run 24-hour operations using 22 Coast Guard helicopters, 3 airplanes, and 28 Coast Guard boats. I just want to stress again that if anybody's in distress, local EOCs, 911, and contact the Coast Guard as soon as you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, when individuals are rescued, they are having to go to somewhere to come out of the elements, and therefore a number of shelters have been set up. At the George R. Brown, which has been the primary or the mega shelter for the city of Houston, George R. Brown is now at about 10,000. That number has increased. And we're working, of course, to ensure enough cots are provided. We're also going to be using, because it has gotten so large and because the police department and officers are spread all over the place, doing a lot of different things at the same time, we're going to be using 50 Texas National Guard members to provide added safety within the parameters of the George R. Brown. But that number continues to grow. What I've decided to do in conversation with the Toyota Center is that we are going to use the Toyota Center to reduce the population at the George R. Brown. So it will become another shelter, but not for direct, what's the word that I'm using it for? Entry,